Away from that, the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah is eliciting reactions in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. For some locals, the ceasefire is victory against Israel. The initial 2-month agreement requires Hezbollah to end its armed presence in southern Lebanon and for Israeli troops to return to their side of the border. Let's give you an update in our next report.
After 1 year of not knowing exactly where to call home, the latest ceasefire deal between Israeli forces and Hezbollah fighters no doubt comes as a big relief for many in Lebanon. More than 3,500 Lebanese citizens have been killed in Israeli strikes in their cross-border conflict. More than 1 million of them have been forced to flee by Israeli military action. Thousands have been wounded with thousands of homes destroyed. But some Israelis reportedly feel their country has lost the chance to do more damage to Hezbollah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has met the heads of Israel's northern municipalities. A website of Israel's local news channel, Ynet, reports that the meeting turned into a shouting match, with some of the local officials frustrated that Israel was taking pressure off the nation's enemies in Lebanon without offering an immediate plan to get civilians home. In late November at the UN General Assembly in New York, a deal looked fast approaching. Diplomats from the US and UK were convinced that a ceasefire very similar to the one that is now in force was about to be brokered. But when Prime Minister Netanyahu went to the podium to deliver a fiery speech, he refused to accept any pause in Israel's offensive. For him, damaging Hezbollah means damaging Iran. Now, Mr. Netanyahu says Hamas in Gaza would be under even more pressure. Palestinians are expressing fear over the possibility of another escalation in Israel's Gaza offensive. Now, Mr. Netanyahu says Hamas in Gaza would be under even more pressure. Palestinians are expressing fear over the possibility of another escalation in Israel's Gaza offensive.
And world leaders are still reacting to the cessation of hostilities in Lebanon. Secretary General of the United Nations says the deal, which stipulates an initial 60-day cessation of hostilities, represents the first ray of hope for peace in the regional war. Iran's foreign minister hopes the agreement would lead to a permanent ceasefire. Turkey is asking Israel to compensate for the destruction it caused in Lebanon. The Palestinian presidency is calling for global pressure on Israel to stop its actions in Gaza and the West Bank. South Africa expressed support for the implementation of the agreement in Lebanon and called for a similar move in Gaza. For more on the news side to the Israel-Hezbollah conflict, a journalist, Mariam Saleh, joins me from the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Good to have you join us, Mariam. Help us paint a picture. What is the situation in Lebanon following the announcement of the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire?
Well, of course, for the people of Lebanon, it is considered a victory. The people have directly, the very first few minutes, right after the ceasefire, you had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands actually, going back to their villages and towns, whether in South Lebanon or the southern suburbs of Beirut, as well as the Bekaa regions. Wherever they were displaced, they returned to their towns, except for those towns that are at the border. Notice that the Israelis from yesterday still shooting at anyone who came close to the border towns, those are at close proximity to the border. Of course, the people of Lebanon believe that it is a victory. Why? Because the Israelis were unable to achieve any of their military objectives, or at least their stated objectives, like weakening the resistance, like pushing Hezbollah's forces back from away from the border. We noticed that until the very last moment, just before the ceasefire, the resistance fighters were still launching their rockets at close proximity at the Israeli forces and they're more competent. So they make clear that they will not make an occupation easy for the Israelis. They said they will not accept another occupation of South Lebanon. The people have also said that, of course, this is considered a strategic victory because with all the intelligence, all the capabilities, all the military assistance given to the Israelis by the United Nations, by the U.S. administration, the Israelis were not able to confront and to defeat a humble resistance movement, which of course does have the capabilities. But still, with all of the capabilities of the Israeli military, it is considered one of the strongest in the world, and still it was not able to really advance in South Lebanon. We know that more than 70,000 troops of the Israeli occupation forces were at the border. They were not able to take a full town or village and take full control of it. So that in itself is considered something to be proud of by the Lebanese people.
I hear you, Maria, but you know, Israel had already warned that it is not safe to return to certain areas just yet. And I'm curious if perhaps the border is one of those areas it expects citizens not to go to yet because there might still be some level of, fire exchange there.
Exactly. What there is not fire exchange. Hezbollah has proven that it really respects ceasefires, it respects truce. We saw in November of 2023 when there was a prisoner swap and a truce in Gaza, Hezbollah directly stopped its operations, but the Israelis continued to violate that truce and target the Lebanese southern people and strike their towns, their villages, their homes. We see this happening now as well. There is an exchange of fire action. The Israelis are just shooting at the people that come anywhere close to their hometowns. The people have missed their hometowns. They want to go see their town. Some of them are also keen on making sure that they go and they rebuild directly after this war. The Israelis are not allowing this up until now, but this is only conditioned on the fact that there is a gradual withdrawal of the Israeli forces and a deployment of the Lebanese armed forces. If this does not happen, then the people will once more support the resistance in its fight against occupation, as they had during the 1980s, throughout the 1990s until 2000 and in 2006.
All right.
And even now with their support to Gaza, they also supported the resistance.
All right, Miriam. You know, these are actually heavy allegations because in this deal, each side is expected to withdraw its troops such that at least for the initial 60 days, there's some level of peace. So it would also be very important for people to be able to see some of these things to, add credence to it. And remember also that the Lebanese army had said it was preparing to deploy an expected 5,000 troops to the south as part of the deal. But then, of course, we'll see, how all of that goes. But in the meantime, I'm concerned about the people. How are they settling in? Are there shelters in place? Is there energy supply? Because I suppose that some of these areas might be lying in ruins already.
Absolutely. There's areas where there's no electricity and no phone connections. Phone wires are down, the electricity wires are down, the water also supplies are not reaching the houses. However, you still see that keenness among the people. It is a sort of a stubbornness, actually, among the Lebanese people. We saw it in 2000 after the Israeli withdrawal in 2000, where they kept their agents, their spies on the entire buffer zone, but people really entered, and really the entire area, to return to their homes. Despite the difficult circumstances, they still are eager to return to those homes because, let's not forget, they are displaced. Some of them were living in schools. Some of them were in areas which were not also providing them with good assistance or aid. And so this is why they prefer not to be considered displaced or refugees. They prefer to go back to their hometowns and villages. Whereas you have others going to check on their property at least, to see what can be done, to really dust themselves off, to rebuild their homes. This might take a little time, but up until now, they only at least wanted to go back and show their support for the resistance and the fact that they are ready to bear this national cost and this sacrifice if it means that their sovereignty is not conceded.
Point of view as a journalist, do you see the ceasefire impacts the war in Gaza?
It definitely should, because I think it has two different points. First of all, I think it's more of a positive stance in order to let the international community push for a ceasefire to stop the genocidal war on Gaza on one hand. On the other hand, it really gave a push to the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people believe that the people of Lebanon have shown that through the sacrifices they can bring about a victory. They can force the Israelis with the continuous war and of course the petition that was forced upon the Israeli military, that they can force them to stop the war. I think that this will also add to their fervor in the resistance and support for the resistance to bring about a victory also in Gaza, to make sure that the Israeli military is forced to stop its genocide war and killing of civilians and to withdraw completely from Gaza.
But you know, Israel would continually tell you that it's defending its territory and, well, it has the right to do that. But as we conclude the conversation, I wanted to ask how it's been for you as a journalist doing your job in the midst of the conflict.
A lot of my colleagues have been killed. At least 7 journalists have been killed in Lebanon, even in areas which were considered not confrontation zones. For example, we have one of our correspondents in the Al-Mayadeen television, along with their cameraman and their assistant. They were killed in an area which was not a confrontation zone. And that was in the beginning of the battlefield, at the beginning of the support front, where Hezbollah was specifically only targeting the military bases. We also saw the killing of a photojournalist who was also doing his job in the early days of the confrontation, and he was clearly wearing his press jacket, his shield, his helmet, but that we saw how the Israelis burned him alive, actually. And so working as a journalist has been very, very difficult. And at the same time, being a Lebanese, a person who really belongs to this land, I feel also more determined to cover the news and make sure that the world knows the truth about the matters and how it is the Israelis that are committing atrocious crimes. As they continue to say that they're defending themselves, this has been the case since 1948 until now. We lived through the occupation. We know what the Israelis have done. So they're always trying to turn the tables, trying to turn the image, presenting themselves as a victim. I think the world should know, and they will know one day, that it is the people who are fighting for their freedom.
All right, Mariam. I hear you, and I hear you, Mariam. Thank you very much, for sharing with us your experience and for bringing us updates, really, on this de-escalation we're looking at. Thank you. Mariam Saleh from Beirut in Lebanon.